Good afternoon, Wakefield. I'm Dan Sherman, member of the Finance Committee, and we're here once again another year to discuss our financial picture for the town. With me is the town administrator, Steve Mayo, for a few more months.
Few more months.
A few more months.
But who's counting?
Yep. And also with me is the superintendent of schools, Dr. Doug Lyons. We will follow up with, as our normal procedures in terms of going forward, discussing the past, the present, and the future. So in the past, I'm going to talk a little bit about the receipts we received so far through fiscal year 24, our account balances, and our spending. We're going to get to the present in terms of fiscal year 25 and what we're doing this year. And then we're going to get into the future and talk about fiscal year 26 and looking beyond fiscal year 26 for what we're projecting for expenses and revenue. So I'm going to start on receipts. So this particular chart shows the three main elements of receipts. Local receipts is the top piece in blue. We've had a pretty good run up in local receipts, as you'll see in a moment. State aid is the middle section there in purple. And of course, the biggest piece of our revenue receipts is the tax levy, our property taxes, and how those come through. And you'll notice that is the lion's share of our local receipts. And fortunately, that is an area that the feds and the states really can't cut. So we're very happy about that since it's a large portion. And this shows that portion over time. So receipts back in 2001 were just about 67% of our total. It increased up to close to 80%, and we're hovering around 78, 79% now. State aid as a percentage dropped significantly since 2001. We used to be about 20% of our receipts with state aid. Now it's barely over 10%. And then local receipts has been running at about 10% of our total receipts all along from 2001 all the way through 2024. Looking more carefully at the local receipts, we break it down by type. And you'll see at the bottom of the graph is motor vehicle excise taxes. This is our largest portion of local receipts by far, not even close to anything else up there. And it's a piece that we really encourage people to buy new cars. Really helps us out. When the economy is good, you can see things got a bit of an uptick. You'll see back in 2008, 2009, 10, when we had the big recession, we had quite a drop in the motor vehicle excise and the total receipts. So fiscal year 10 was a low point shortly after that recession. Then when things picked up and had been climbing. One of the things of note for fiscal year 24 is a large increase in the investment income, the yellow piece at the top. Interest rates, as everybody is aware, has increased. We had a substantial amount of money in our checking accounts for the high school right next door. They're building it and looking good so far. I guess it's on budget and on time. Last I heard, but you'll see that yellow bar is quite a bit higher because of the money set aside to pay the bills for the new high school. We don't expect that number to stay there because a lot of that money is going to be spent during fiscal year 25 and 26. The lion's share, I think, is how much? Be pretty much gone in 26, I think, all the spend.
Well, towards 26, 27, yeah, it'll be spent, yeah.
Yeah. So the money that we are setting aside in those accounts does earn some nice interest, but that is going to go away. So that nice big yellow bar is going to make a big change. The other item I think noteworthy is licenses and permits. We've had a big uptick, and that's that light purple piece. You'll see that's quite a bit larger than it has been in the past. And basically, it's all the building that's going around the town. Everybody has noticed that, of course. We'll see what happens going forward on that figure. That may not be sustainable. I doubt if it is.
It'll be fairly healthy in the next couple of years, but in that fiscal year 24, which is a big jump that year, that has the building permit for the Head of the Lake project, which in itself was $1 million. So that really helped out there a lot.
Yeah.
But hopefully taxes will increase as those get billed too, so.
Yeah. So those are local receipts. State aid in terms of dollars, you can see we were about almost $7 million back in 1990, and it's dropped substantially in 2002, 2003. That was the dot-com bust for those that recall. 2008, 9, and 10, it dropped again because of the Great Recession, and then it's been steadily climbing ever since. Just over 13.5 million for 24, and just over 14 million is our forecast for 26.
But even though that has been climbing in dollars, when you went back to that first slide that you showed, second slide that you showed, as a percentage of our budget, that has been decreasing.
It's been
And
decreasing.
That's something we'll have to talk about, and
Right,
we'll address that a little later.
Yeah, another way to think about it is the rate of growth from 1990 to 2024 has been substantially less than the rate of growth in our total budget.
Exactly.
In terms of what we have for accounts, our savings, if you will, our reserves, we have a stabilization fund. And this line graph shows the dollars as the dashed line. So on the left-hand side, you can see we're just a little short of $2 million back in 2004. And now that we've gotten up to 2024, we're almost at $4 million. As a percentage of our total budget, which is a solid line, it started out about 3%, dropped all the way down to around 2%, and then has been slowly creeping up to around 3% of our budget. Important note is that we have a policy that's been adopted by the Finance Committee and initially and selectmen back then, Town Council now, of trying to maintain reserves of at least 10%. So this 3% is the first element of that reserve. We'll get to free cash here right now. So on free cash, this is basically what we have available in our checking account to spend on whatever expenses come across the table. And again, I'm showing in the pink dashed line the balance. It was extremely low for many, many years, only $2 million back from 2000 to 2011. Then we started having a nice run where we had the power line up right behind us on Montrose. We did, we got out of the GIC.
We got into the GIC.
In the GIC,
Yeah.
out of Maya.
Out of Maya,
Yeah,
in the insurance, health
Maya.
insurance. Yeah.
Was it the municipal insurance something? So we made a number of changes in the budget, and we really got our free cash up to where it needs to be and has been for a while. So at the end of 24, we had a free cash of about $12 million, representing about 10% of the budget, and combined with the 3% from the previous slide, we were actually at 13%, and looked really good in terms of our reserve goal of 10%. However, as you see at the bottom, a little footnote, in the 2024 town meeting, we spent almost $4.5 million of that free cash. So today, that free cash is closer to about 7%, 7.5% of our budget, plus the 3. So we're sitting right about 10% as the three of us sit here at the table. We would like to keep the 10%. That's going to be one of our challenges. We have a debt service fund. This is used to pay various projects over time. Projects that this fund handles includes things like the Galvin public safety building. We had a roads bond. We had the recreation bond.
Walton School.
Walton Schools is in this. Yeah. So a lot of capital projects. Money is funded into this debt service fund. Thank you, Phil McCarty. And then this fund pays out to handle those obligations for the bondholders.
Yeah, we also run some of the other big capital purchases, fire trucks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, open ladder trucks, things like that, yeah.
Right. So we try to keep that at a healthy balance. You notice in 2020, it got extremely small. We're up to around $1.2 million. I think the current forecast is maybe back to $1.2 million at the end of fiscal year 25. If memory serves. So in terms of capital, this graph is a little complicated. I looked at the capital spend in the two different ways. One is the direct capital budget that will be voted on at town meeting. Those are the two lower lines. The purple is the actual dollars spent, or just over $2 million for '24. Will be just over $2 million for '25 and '26. And as a percentage of the budget, which is the green line, we're running at about, between 1 and 2% of our total budget. For '24, we're at 2%. But because of the debt service fund and all the money spent on things like public safety and Walton and so forth, I've combined the bond payments to the capital for the two upper lines. And that shows as a percentage of our total budget, roughly 7.5% for '24. And as a dollar amount, it's running just over $3 million, $3.5 million for as a percentage of our total budget. And that last line, the I guess it's turquoise, teal, at 5%. It'd be good if we could get it above 5%. Be nice if we could get that a little bit higher. We want to maintain our buildings. We need to maintain our equipment. But that's one of those areas that sometimes it got shoved to the wayside. For example, in 2000, it was all the way down to just 3% of our total budget, and just, what was it, 2006? It was like $350,000 what we spent on capital versus the $2 million today. So it was pretty sad back then. Large budgets, what we're spending, and these are just large budgets that are not part of departments in other areas. So on the healthcare, you'll see we're spending close to $16 million. It'll be over $16 million for fiscal year '26. Retirement has a big increase. We've been really trying to take care of our unfunded liability for retirement. And the New England Regional Voc School is a significant piece. It's over $2 million. You'll see that. In terms of at the bottom, you'll note that the rate of increase in healthcare is just 3.8%, so that's pretty good over that time period. Retirement, though, is quite a bit higher at 8.7. It's not my fault, it really isn't. I'm on the retirement board. And the regional Voc has been quite an increase at 8.9%, and some of that last increases are because of the new Voc school. So we're going to see quite an uptick in that expense in the next couple of years. But I think what a really nice thing about this graph is the big drop in 2012 to 13 when we went to the GIC and started funding OPEB at the tune of $1.6 million. You'll see, and as you go through the budgets, the OPEB portion, that's OPEB, I should explain, is the post-retirement medical line item. We're going to have to cut some of that because of increase in expenses and not enough increase in revenue. So over the last 5 years, this just gives you a summary on the personal services budget. This is basically salaries for the employees. Schools, you'll see, went from about 34 million up to 44, 5.1% increase over that 5-year period. Fire has been a real challenge for us, a lot of overtime, a lot of issues in the fire department, a little bit of expansion of number of personnel during that period, but the overtime portion has really kind of hurt us there. Library has kept a nice low number, 2.8%. Police, 4.7%. DPW at 4%. General government, 3.9%. Human services, we made some significant changes in the human services, added some people. So that's more of a people change rather than actual individual salaries getting that kind of increase. But the total over the time period, $67 million, 5%, and that $67 million represents about 60% of our total budget. In terms of those budgets by departments, so this brings in everything, all the expenses, contracts, so forth. Schools is running at about 5.1% per year. Fire, again, as I mentioned, some real struggles there. And fire, schools, library, police, all of those for the dominant portion of their budget is salaries. The other expenses pale in comparison to those. DPW, though, does have a lot of other things going on. General government is at 5.9. That's basically salaries as well as human services. You'll see the total just went up by 5.3% versus the 12 we saw on the previous slide because of how we shifted that budget around in terms of putting in personnel and taking out contracts. So it makes human services look a whole lot better. So the total budgets over that time period went up about 4.6% for those major departments. So looking at forward and current budget priorities for 26, in no particular order, although I think it's alphabetic, buildings, education, energy efficiency, fields, playgrounds, public health and wellness, public infrastructure, and public safety. These have been our priorities for a number of years. There really isn't too much that we've either added or taken away. This is where we're spending most of our money. This is where we really need to take care of things.
And there's been a lot of societal changes too,
Right.
that are
Within those.
Within those that are
Yeah.
shown. You talked about the public health and wellness. We've done a lot more with the mental well-being of the community. I know the schools, education, there's a lot more with English language learners and special education costs. So there have been, societal priorities baked in there all the way through. Always public safety. And we're going to see, in the bonding area, a lot more money spent on energy efficiency. The Galvin School will have the solar roof. I think items are being delivered, and maybe as we speak, they're starting to get that done. So that should help in energy costs, but we got to put some money up front in there too. So I think, a lot of discussions between the finance committee, school committee, town council about where we want to put these priorities. So that's a couple of slides is kind of baked in. So it's good to see.
I would agree there, and I think what's interesting is about these budget priorities is that education listed just as education, the school system as part of the municipality touches on every one of the bullets that are on the screen, right? We talk about this all the time. So go the towns, so go the schools, right? And that kind of the context and the connectedness that we've created in kind of budgeting over the last few years has really been important for us to continue the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and also in education, we include the library. And one of the things that we're going to see when we talk about the capital is the fact that we need to spend some money on the HVAC system because the library has been designated a cooling zone. And last year, they struggled.
It wasn't too cool.
It wasn't too cool, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't too cool. And the library usage is still very, very high.
Yeah.
I've talked to Catherine numerous times about, how's the flow of the people and so forth. It's just always busy. There's always people coming in. So, that's a big part of our education as well. That shouldn't be ignored. So for fiscal year 26, at the end of fiscal year 26, because of the numbers you'll see here momentarily, we do expect our reserves to drop below a policy level of 9.7% versus our 10 that we have for fiscal year 25 is just not. We don't think it's going to make it. We're hoping that we will get 10%. I mean, 0.3. I'm not going to quibble too much. But right now, based on what we know for fiscal year 25, reading the tea leaves, talking to Kevin, our town town administrator assistant,
Chief Financial Officer.
Chief Financial Officer. I guess that's his current title. We hope to get 10%, but right now we're looking at 9.7. We have capital projects over the next 5 years that came in at $37 million. Now, we're going to fund just over $2 million, but we do have a really big challenge in front of capital projects in front of us. Snow and ice, thankfully, came in at a big zero, nice big plus. And as I mentioned earlier, the investment income, we expect some nice figures coming in on that for fiscal year 25, and that'll help us out a bit for ending fiscal year 25 at a positive note. So but 26 itself may not be quite so generous with the interest income. Our debt, we have a lot of debt in this town. I mentioned these projects, we have an outstanding amount of debt. Think of this as being our mortgage, as $28.8 million between the public safety, Greenwood roof, recreation, Galvin, Walton roads, drainage, etc. Our retirement fund, we have unfunded liability of roughly $61 million as of January 1st of 24. It's probably about the same number today as we sit here. The OPEB, that again is the post-retirement medical plan. We have unfunded liability of about $65 million as of last June. So our total debt that we have to pay off over time is roughly $155 million. So we have a large obligation. Revenues. So for fiscal year 26, our tax levy, we expect an increase of around 3.746 million, representing 4.1%, to be about $92 million in total. And right now we're including an estimate, this is my estimate, of $1,444,000 for new growth. I think Kevin has got 1.5 million, but I'm not going to quibble over $56,000 as a difference. We're always asking our town assessor for the best and greatest number, and he keeps deferring us and saying, I don't have one for you. So we'll see how that comes in. Right now, we're looking at an increase in state aid of roughly $284,000. I think that's the governor's number, the House at a slightly higher number. I'm not sure if the Senate has come up with anything yet.
No, the Senate hasn't met yet, and although it seems to be trending in the right direction. So let's hope that that increases. Trending in our direction,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Fingers crossed. Local receipts, we're assuming is going to be level compared to 24 and 25. We think 26 is going to be roughly 11.5 million, same spot. Because the receipts are less than our expenses, we need to come in at 1.71 million from free cash, so that'll knock that down. One of the revenues we're going to have is $989,000 from the light department under the pilot program, which is payment in lieu of taxes. We're going to draw $285,000 from available funds. These funds DPW has from like the cemetery fees. There's a fund from the library that we get some interest on.
I think bus fees are also included
Bus
in there, too.
fees. We
Yeah.
also get some wetland fees that
Yeah.
come in off of that.
$4,500, not a lot.
Something
Yeah.
like that, yeah. So we get a token amount. So total revenues are expected to be at $124.4 million. Expenses. So this gives you an idea of what we have for expenses. General government is coming in at 3.7 million. Public safety at 16.5, 1.1 for human services. Public works is coming in at 8.4. And schools are coming in at 55.5. And I'm going to ask Doug to expand on the 55.5 that we're going to spend for schools.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. So this year, the budget that we are proposing is a $55 million, $425,161, which represents a 5.94% increase, or just a little over $3 million. And that 5.94 was kind of brought down because of us applying kind of funds from our revolving accounts to create an offset to kind of limit the budget that we were asking for, and kind of looking at the tax levy and trying to really do whatever we can or could do to kind of make this as affordable as possible. We know it's a big number, and we're watching kind of revenue at the state, and we're also watching what's happening with federal grants and the Federal Department of Education as well. But this $55 million, again, represents just under a 6% increase, with $300,000 coming from revolving funds. It also includes kind of a collaborative effort to kind of help with capital costs and to also help with benefits from food service. We're also paying very close attention to food service and kind of meals being picked up at the state level. And so there's just a lot of, you'll hear this word everywhere you hear it on the radio, you hear it on podcasts, you hear it on the news, this financial uncertainty, right? So we very much are trying to look into and understand the state and federal financial uncertainty and what this mean or could mean for the schools, because we have several positions that are funded through federal grants and federal programs that are funded through federal grants. And so we're watching that very closely. But this budget that we are seeking or that we're proposing and have presented to town council, to FinCom, to school committee, and kind of I feel like we've gotten kind of favorable responses or support from all of those groups, really represents 4 drivers, you know. And so this represents an overall increase in labor costs of 5.15%. Utility costs are up, transportation. We have a new contract this year for our bus transportation, as well as increased tuitions for out-of-district placements, which I think Steve mentioned a moment ago. And it's nice, it's encouraging when Steve can summarize our budget, right? And so I think it's just a testament to
I've been learning the last 17 years.
Well, but I think it's also kind of evident in our ability to work together and collaborate through this entire process. But we've been grateful to be able to do
Absolutely.
To do this work. So that's where we are. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So after the schools, we've got the library coming in at 2.1 million, vocational schools at 2.7. We did get a little bit of break. We thought we were going to get a bigger number from the Northeast Voc from their project up the hill here. We picked up 200,000, I think.
A little bit less than we thought.
Yeah, a little less than we thought. So we got a little break there. Unclassified are other odds and ends that we have to take care of.
Insurances mainly, things like that.
Yeah, and benefits. Benefits, of course, is a big nut, 26.6. So you got the healthcare is is close to 16 million. You got about 8 million on retirement. So the benefits portion of the budget is quite large. Every once in a while, I get a request from one of my clients, the public sector, who says, Dan, we're going to hire some people. What should we put in as a line item in terms of the cost for this person? We know what we're going to pay them, but what should we assume for health care and retirement and
workers' comp,
and post-retirement? And it's, you add it all up, it's like another 40% increase over the salary. 40% of salary has to be added to the salary in order to look at the cost in total. And because the work that I do, I always say, if I ask them if it's public safety, fire, or police, and if they say yes, I said then add another 3 or 4%, just because of retirement and with OPEB, they're a little more expensive because they can retire earlier at age 55 versus 65 and get full benefits. So the fire and police tend to be a little more expensive, but a lot of people don't think about when they hire somebody, they only look at the salary. They really don't look at all the benefits that come along with that salary and that person. So need to be wary of that. So for fiscal year 26, these items all add up to almost $119 million. We have others. And so we have capital at 2.15 million. Debt service is coming in at 3 million. Again, the debt service fund is to take care of all the obligations we've already committed to. Our trash fee, our trash refuse, 2.46 million. That went up less than expected.
That was actually level funded from last year.
Yeah,
we were able
it was a
to,
surprise.
a couple of things happened. We were able, Joe Conway did a great job negotiating the contract. And there are 2 portions of that contract. There's the, the picking up and hauling fee, and then there is the disposal fee. And luckily, Wakefield, and kudos to the community, has done a real good job in recycling and reusing, and our disposal fee did not increase as we thought, actually went down a little bit. So that's a big help that we needed in the budget. this year, and hopefully we'll continue those efforts because it helps.
Yeah.
More people using black earth and things like that, and so that really does help. So that's a tangible, um, indication of that. So I
Yeah, we
appreciate
started
it.
using the black earth about a year ago. We have a neighbor who signed up for it, and we contribute to that. It's a good program. Overlay account, $600,000. Just to let people know, overlay account is there in case of abatements on the property taxes. We have not had a lot of that. That is a budget that has been coming in under budget for many years. And it actually has been helped us out. And we expect some of that money that is set aside for overlay to actually come back this fiscal year 25.
We'll add to our free cash.
Add to our
balance.
free
Yeah,
cash, so that's
very
going to help
helpful.
us out a
Yeah.
bit. And, thanks to that group. State and county, we have to pay 2.72 million to the state and county for services, MBTA services in that. The county, Middlesex County, takes a chunk from us for their services, registry of deeds, and there was another big piece.
The big piece is, well, it's the MBTA, and Wakefield pays $711,000 next year to allow for the privilege of having the MBTA run through our
Right.
community. And the other big part of that is charter school.
Oh, yes.
Charter school sending tuition, which is about 1.8 million. So that's another area that when we talk to the state delegation, we need assistance on charter school. We need assistance on Chapter 70. And I know at the end I'll continue my rant in those areas, but that is something that does affect us. So
Absolutely.
the state gives us state aid, which is wonderful, but as I say, you got to turn the sheet over to look
Right.
at the assessments as well. So
Right.
the net is not as good as we'd like, but
Yeah, that's the key, is the net doesn't
Yeah.
go up much.
Yeah.
It hasn't. So, looking at fiscal year 26, again, expected increase in revenue is roughly 2.8 million or 2.3%. Line items, or actually not line items, but categories of spend, salaries about 4 million, retirement 518,000 increase. Healthcare is about 1.7 million.
and healthcare, let's pause there, Dan, if you don't mind.
I don't mind
That's a
at all.
big increase in healthcare, and the state program went up, the GIC program, which is still the best deal around, went up 14%. So
Yeah.
that's a big hit for us. I've talked to some other town managers around who have been hit who aren't in the state, are hit with a 30% increase in healthcare. So actually, our healthcare cost, including funding OPED, and we did have to decrease it, is still around the same it was in dollars,
Oh,
8
back in
years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2010.
So that's been a big success, and the office does a really good job of putting people in different state plans. But that's something we'll look at, and we continue to work every year. Hopefully, there won't be another increase like that.
Medicare is going up to 58,000, and that's just the 1.45% of salary that goes to Washington to cover future Medicare costs. Vocational schools went up 100,000. Capital went up 100,000. As we already mentioned a couple of times, the decrease in OPEB spend for post-retirement medical costs is down to $500,000. And then department increases, we've already talked a little bit about that. Total is going to go up about 5.5%. And you can see schools, police, fire, DPW, library, and general government. General government, Steve, 14.7%
I know.
increase.
See what happens when I leave?
You want to explain that
I can
one?
explain that one. So in general government, a couple of things happened. We made there had to be some succession planning done last year, which we funded a half-year position. So that became a full-year position, as well as the fact that the town planner, which is in this budget, was also used with the last of the ARPA funds. So that is going to be replaced by tax dollars. So it's not a huge budget. So money-wise, it's not, dollar-wise, it's not a lot, but the percentage jumps off the page there at you. But that's going to smooth out next year.
I saved it for last.
I know you did. That's okay.
So a little bit more on capital. We've got, this is the broad categories. At the town meeting, the warrant you're going to have a sheet that looks something like this with all the little details. But in terms of groups, we have prior leases where we've purchased like dump trucks and other DPW heavy equipment that's very expensive. We lease those and spend out over, I think, 4 or 5 year time horizon to pay off those. So we have some leftovers from that. $804,000 in the fleet, which includes 3 police vehicles this year. Facilities, $558,000, which includes, we mentioned the HVAC system for the library and some other projects around the town.
I mean, the library HVAC system really let go last summer, is what it was, and we had library workers, not in the areas, although we got it repaired in the areas where the public comes, but in off-public areas that were actually sweltering. So that's a necessity.
Right. Yeah, and out of the 558, 230,000 is for the library,
Yeah.
the roof and the system.
Yeah.
$250,000 fields, parks, and cemeteries, miscellaneous 168, which includes, I think, some IT items are in there.
Yes.
So the grand total of $2,153,000 for capital through tax levy, and then water and sewer. We got some capital projects for both water and sewer enterprise accounts. Those are funded through your water and sewer bills. So in total, looking at the summary, total expend for fiscal year 25 is about 119 million. For 26, it's coming in at 124.4 million, an increase of 5.6 million or 4.7%. Revenue is projected to be 122,734, which leaves a difference of $1.7 million from for free cash to cover that shortfall. So challenges. We still need to do work on our buildings, field maintenance and so forth. Sidewalks, playgrounds and so forth. We're still working on those. We have a road bond, which still has helped us out a lot. But we're still, working on other aspects of our capital. Stormwater, we're still making, do we have much left on stormwater at this point? I don't know. I haven't talked to Joe about.
No, I think we're pretty good. And, you'll notice there's no article for stormwater this year, which is nice.
Right.
We may have to come back in the next year or so, but I think we're a couple of projects being worked on. We are much better than we were
Just a few years
just a few years ago.
Yeah.
But that's an ongoing issue. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like the
Yeah.
weather's getting wetter and in more intense times. So
Right. We have some capital projects that I mentioned earlier, about $37 million that are in front of us that not all that will get funded, of course, not at $2 million a year over 5 years, so we can spend 10 out of 37 roughly. We've got some real challenges. As everybody's aware, there's a lot of noise around reductions in federal aid, which filters to the state, which then filters to us in many cases. So both federal and state aid is an area that is really going to be a problem. Right now, inflation has been relatively high and continues to be high, especially on buildings. And that inflation rate has been exceeding our revenue increase rate. That's been hurt. And we also, as I mentioned, really have a challenge of maintaining our 10% reserves. I know that some of the rating agencies would like us to be at 15%. That's not going to happen. It'd be wonderful if we did, but I think a 10% is the right spot to be in terms of reserves.
it was always the right spot to be. Somehow it changed.
Yeah, somehow somebody decided it needed to be higher. So opportunities, potential increase in state aid. And I think I'm going to turn this one over to Steve. And
If we could
Bring up
slip over. So one thing that I've looked at over the years, and thank you, and I've talked a lot about, different communities get different amount of Chapter 70 aid. Chapter 70 is the main aid that comes out from the state for education. And if you can go to the beginning of it, and perfect, next slide would be great if they can. Nope, if they go, perfect. So next one. There you
we
go.
go.
All right, so I've looked at the local aid history and what it has gone up over years, okay? And there have been very few years that the increase in state aid, Chapter 70 being the lion's share on the left, then you see UGR or unrestricted local aid and the net. Very few years has state aid, the increase in state aid met or increased inflation. Okay, so we're already going behind the 8 ball. We had a little bit in fiscal 23 and 24, but if you go to the next slide, I think it shows the history of it has not been.
Just excuse me a second, Steve. I assume for the audience, the percentage increase
Is the increase year over year
on the net.
on the net. On the net.
Yeah.
So, and it hasn't really, inflation has been, usually more during those years. So it has met only a couple of times. So it's really has failed to keep pace with inflation, except in 2018, 2023, and 24. The charter school assessment have averaged over $1 million per year since 2017. Now, the state has seemed to, do grants in local areas versus direct aid, which is, it's hard to apply for them. It takes a lot of time, and I do feel that having it in the local receipt package allows us to handle that more at this level and a town meeting level, which is what should be. Next slide, please. So I started kind of playing around with what each town gets on per pupil reimbursements of our neighbors, okay? Now, I know that this is very simplistic because there is this big formula at the state level regarding Chapter 70, but I do think that Wakefield demographically is very similar to Melrose, Reading, Stoneham, maybe a little different than Saugus, mainly a little different from Linfield, yet Wakefield, out of all of those, gets the least per pupil on Chapter 70 reimbursement. Now, I understand that the total amount we get is very much based on the number of students you have. If you have a community like Malden that has a lot more students, much higher student population, of course their total Chapter 70 reimbursement is going to be different. But I look at per pupil because that's the only thing that I can really make sense out of. Next slide, please. So I started playing around a little bit and said, what if Wakefield received the same Chapter 70 dollars per pupil as Linfield? We'd get $500,000 more. As Melrose, almost $1.5 million more. Stoneham, $1.5 million more. Reading, $1.5 million more. Saugus, I don't know what happened, $9.8 million more. That would have been great. But, we talked a little bit about our deficit being $1.7 million. If we got the same as Melrose, Stoneham, and Reading per pupil, which I think we're very similar of, I think we're less similar with Linfield, and they get more than us anyway. What a difference that would make in our conversation. So that's something that, we go back to our opportunities page, back to the original program there, if you don't mind. That would be the original PowerPoint. That would make a big difference. So that's something that I've talked about with the town council. I know that the superintendent, with the finance committee, and I'm going to mention it at town meeting as well, further endearing myself to everybody. But I do think that's something that for years has been a struggle in Wakefield, and I've been doing this. This is nothing new. I've been doing this, comparison with other towns for, the last 10, 15 years, and it kind of, I love it when Chapter 78 goes up, and I think it will go up this year. I think what will happen is every per pupil, the per pupil aid will go up across the board, and it won't make a difference. We won't bridge the gap. We won't change the gap. We'll still be behind where we are in the list, but that's okay. I take it, but then and I'm happy when we get the extra money, and then I'll look at the other communities and I'll get angry again.
Yeah.
All right. So, on opportunities, we still look at grants. We're
Yep.
still out there trying to find the grants. I know both at town hall and at the schools, you guys are looking for them all the time.
And they do help with specific projects, like we are looking at a grant to help out with, helping out library steps, for instance, bandstand. But these aren't going to change our programs for the most part on our side, town side. They're mainly, picking off some smaller capital projects. It does help.
On the school side, we're looking at every grant right now, and we're looking at, what is funded through the grant. If it's a state grant, We're also looking at federal grants. And so we're really looking hard at our entitlement grants in regard to Title I, which supports students that are struggling in certain academic areas, and our Title II grant, which contributes to that, our Title III grant, which supports our multilingual learners, formerly our English language learners, which our population has kind of exploded in that area. So we are really paying close attention. We're also looking at any new grants happening at the state level. We've been very, very fortunate in that our Assistant Superintendent Karen Morrow and her curriculum governance team has been able to work very closely with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed to support curriculum grants, which has accelerated our work in literacy, for example, and we've kind of gotten ahead of a lot of I don't want to say a lot of districts, but we've accelerated the work in such a way, whereas as if those grants don't become available, we're in a pretty good place. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have to think thoughtfully about additional grants that we might be able to apply for. I'm going to talk this evening at school committee about the possibility, or proposing the school committee around school choice, and the potential to participate in that in a kind of a one-year pilot to see how that could work. But also what happens there is that if students were to choice into the district, you get a per pupil expenditure that comes with them. So that could be an additional offset, which might help our budget. But these are on scale, $100,000, but it's like,
Not a million plus. That the
not a
feds-
million
Yeah.
plus, right? And so you're absolutely right, Dan. But this is going to require that we look at, everything that we're doing, and really be thoughtful about how we're settling contracts, right? And so we settled our teacher contract last year, which we're very pleased about. We're in the process of negotiating 6 contracts this spring. We have tentative agreements with 3 units. We have 3 left. But these are our groups that we're working with now. Many of them are kind of our most vulnerable earners that we really need to increase their salaries for them to afford both to live in Wakefield or to work in Wakefield. And so that's kind of where we are now. But we are doing what other districts are doing, and I know Steve and I will kind of visit with our legislators and talk about Chapter 70. We'll talk about additional grants. We'll also talk about transportation, which is a significant issue for us, and the costs that have gone up for all of our busing, right? So that's something that we're trying to tackle as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here right now.
Yeah, and I've been reading about across the country, the scientific community is out there saying, okay, we just lost a bunch of grants for these research projects.
Mhm.
Where do we go now to replace those funds? And they're looking at, the private sector to say, can we get some support from the private sectors, from businesses or something like that? So I think across the country, people are looking everywhere they can to see, okay, where are we going to replace the funds we used to get from Washington? It's a big
So
project.
a big challenge with that, Dan, is who then owns the information that comes from the scientific research,
Exactly.
right? So that's a corollary that's not often discussed, right? So yes, if you replace the funds, then who owns the
information.
intellectual kind of
Yeah.
the intellectual kind of
Yeah, I think
property.
about those studies that the tobacco industry put together
Yeah.
a number of years ago. You don't think those were a little bit tainted?
More doctors
Yeah,
smoke Camel than any
you're-
other brand.
you're-
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're dating yourself right now. I'm
Yeah.
thinking more about
Yeah.
cancer
Okay.
research and kind of what's happening
well,
there.
The oil industry, they're still coming out with them.
So,
Yeah. New growth is, as long as people keep building, add some new growth, local receipts, we're looking at things. And we're looking at other revenue. Where are we, should we be looking at trash fees as a possibility?
A
to
lot of
make up the
our
shortfall?
neighbors have it.
Yeah. Any other fees that need to be adjusted for, the current inflation? So going forward, I did the forecast. Our free cash will increase about 3.3 million at the end of this fiscal year. and it'll get us up to about 9.7% of our total budget. We're starting out at about 1.7 million on deficit spending, but it grows in the next few years to about 2.7 per year, and then goes beyond that. Based on the forecast, right now, we will run out of free cash at the end of fiscal year 29, and our reserves will be depleted at the end of fiscal year 30, if we continue on the current track. The forecast, here you can see expenditures, income, and you'll see the deficit starts out at 1.7, which had already been discussed, grows to 2.5, 3.3, and just continues to increase, and the increase of cost. So we spent a lot of time looking at the assumptions regarding the growth in all of our major departments. We looked at the growth in refuse costs and capital costs, and each of these various line items have their own assumption regarding where we think the costs are going to go in the future. But you can see with the increase of roughly 4.5% on costs and the increase on income roughly at 4%, it's not a formula that's going to work. So for this fiscal year at town meeting, I hope everybody can, hope for good turnout for town meeting starting Monday night. We're going to discuss our expenditures, our income, and the deficit at 1.7, but we are also going to have an eye on 2027 and beyond, because clearly we cannot sustain where we are today. Some changes will have to be made, or somebody strikes gold, maybe find oil underneath the new high school. I don't know, something.
Well, that might not be good.
Yeah, that might not be good. Okay, next to the high school. Yeah, actually, you're probably right. That would not be good. So that's all I have. Again, if there are any closing comments from Dr. Lyons or Steve?
I think that these are we've been here before.
Yeah.
We've there's a lot of experience and talent, and we've had to look at these things before. I like the fact that we're talking about it now and looking forward, the next 2 fiscal years. And I think that the finance committee at the meeting last Thursday night, or a couple Thursday nights ago, really talked about starting earlier in the process and in getting together and really looking at where we are. Because as much as we're forecasting right now, the only number that we really know on the revenue side is what our current tax levy is, and if we add 2.5% to that, what that number will be next year. We don't know new growth yet. We don't know the state yet. But I do think in the interim that the state is going through their budget process, and we should be trumpeting the fact that we need to be, I think, treated equally, and we need to get a bigger piece of the pie there, and that makes a big difference in that column there. And I think we need to look at ourselves too. I think I talked about the trash fee a little bit, but we also, I think we should look at all of our fees on the town side, particularly in the building area, and businesses for restaurants and liquor license and things like that. Those haven't changed in a decade, and so they have to be looked at a little bit as well.
It has been about 10 years since we've adjusted those fees.
And that's a town meeting vote, so that would help out as well.
I think it's also going to require us to look at fees as well, right? And so, one of the things that I can say honestly is that I've grown to appreciate your conservative forecasting. I think it's kept us in a positive space, and I think I feel it now more than ever, right? As I watch some other districts that are kind of looking at overrides right now.
Yeah, there was who did large override? Stoneham.
Stoneham, yeah.
Had a big override that got shut down, and they're talking about closing the library.
They are.
I mean, these are, so I think one of the things that I'm learning, Dan, and is that in looking at the prior 30 years of budgets, right, and trying to learn from them, and looking back, I've realized that taking a 0 or a negative, it compounds. It takes moments to deconstruct what took 10 years to build, right? And so this conservative forecasting that we do, I think, keeps us in a safe space. And so, and again, I genuinely appreciate this more now than ever. I do think back to looking ahead to 26 and 27 and 28, we're going to need to look at fees. We're going to need to understand more and hear more from the state in regard to their planning, because we have questions about, for example, funding food service, right? Will that continue? Will the state be able to support that to continue? What's happening with the millionaire's tax, right? And so if revenue came in over what was forecast, how might that
State,
help, districts? How might that help Wakefield specifically in regard to circuit breaker or special
Yeah, I
education?
understand a lot of it's going to, this MBTA is supposed to get a big piece of that, and more than what people were thinking when it was proposed.
Well, nothing kind of creates a more spirited conversation than these kind of current times we're in, like in having, it's difficult for the state to kind of stay on their plan when, so many other things are uncertain.
And while I think our increases in costs are not outlandish, when you look at the bottom line there, at inflation, slightly above inflation, we need to continue scrutinizing each line item in the budget, and we do. And I know it's, for, the Finance Committee, Town Council first and Finance Committee, they go over every line. So it's, and we have to sharpen that pencil a little bit as well. It's got to be a combination of all these things.
I've been on the Finance Committee for over 20 years, and so I've gone through 2 episodes, if you will, of difficulty. The dot-com bust back in 2001, 2002, and of course in 2008 again. And we've had to cut some services. We eliminated library Sunday hours. I think some school crossing guards was cut back in the 2008, 2009, when the state cut us back. And so that is also a spot where we may have to reduce some services that we've been providing for a number of years just to stay within our, our revenue.
And in 2008, 2009, we didn't have any reserves at all to speak of.
No, we didn't. And that was a big challenge.
Yeah.
That was a huge challenge.
And minimum being spent on capital, nothing on OPEB. It was I think we're in a different space now. But I agree with Doug that the forecasting is great for us to go forward and kind of see how do we make sense out of all this. So I thank you and the Finance Committee. I enjoyed my years there.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you, Wakefield, for watching, and I hope I see many of you Monday night at the Galvin for a town meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you.